I believe everyone is a witness to history, and I think that means that we all have the conscious ability to become an active or passive citizen in our society. I first became an active citizen at the age of 12 in 7th grade when I started to participate in the Holocaust Awareness Museum's Witness to History project. And what this project is it pairs students and young adults with Holocaust survivors. We learn their stories with the goal that now it's my turn or my fellow peers' turns to share these stories to small and large audiences to continue the education of the Holocaust and genocide as a whole. Before we begin, I personally define genocide as the organized killing of a people for the express purpose of putting an end to their very collective existence. Because of its scope, genocide requires central planning and a machinery to implement it. This makes genocide the quintessential state or institutional crime, as I believe only an established authority has the resources to carry out such a scheme of destruction. This is far different than a simple crime of humanity. This is a plot against a people. So I was paired up with Kurt Herman, and I'm 12 years old, about to interview for an hour an 81-year-old Holocaust survivor. And I'm intimidated. All I know about the Holocaust is what I've read in, classroom textbooks. And I'm thinking this man is going to just talk about how he hates Nazis. But I was blown away by what I learned, and that's what I'm here to teach you today by telling you his story and what I learned about genocide and why we need to talk about genocide. Kurt Herman was born on October 27th, 1929, to a middle-class family in the 9th district of Vienna, Austria. His father ran a fabric business, and being a middle-class citizen, people generally lived in apartments, and they would line the city, and there were about 4 families to every apartment floor complex, and there was one bathroom that all 4 families shared. That was considered middle-class Vienna. And I remember Kurt telling me about how they would travel to the bathhouses maybe twice a week. That was their bathing schedule. That was their life, but they enjoyed it. So Kurt, until the age of 8, his life is completely normal, completely amazing, as you put it. He's going to a school that's right across the street that admits boys and girls, Jews and non-Jews. He plays football, in other words, soccer, with his Jewish and non-Jewish friends, and life is pretty normal. There's anti-Semitism, but his life doesn't seem much different than what my life, being a Jewish American in the 21st century in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, is. And everything astronomically changes when the Anschluss happens, when Adolf Hitler annexes Austria. In 1923, while a member of the National Socialist Party, Hitler attempted a coup in Munich to seize power, which resulted in his imprisonment, during which he dictated the first volume of his autobiography and political manifesto, Mein Kampf, or My Struggle. In it, he wrote, "If you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed." His Reich would later distort the narrative of an entire population. After his release in 1924, Hitler gained popular support by attacking the Treaty of Versailles and promoting pan-Germanism, anti-Semitism, and anti-communism, uniting citizens against a common enemy by effectively demonizing anyone who could ever oppose his authority. By the end of World War II, 2/3 of the European Jewish population were annihilated, and an additional 5 million lives were lost. So now we're going to hear from Kurt.
In March, they came. The day they came till the day I left. You can take my word for it. Every day was worse for Jews. About a week or 2 after the Germans took over, I went to school, like I did every other day. Now there was a line drawn down the center of the school and said on the wall, Jews over here, Aryans, blah, blah, over here. All the pictures that we previously had on the wall were gone. Only Adolf Hitler's picture appeared. The boys at the other side of the aisle, who were my soccer buddies, now had a swastika on their arm and began to harass and bully us all the time. Let me explain to you, when you live in a dictatorship and you're the persecuted party, you don't have one single right. Nothing. They control the press. They control the radio. They open your mail. If they want you to get it, you don't get it. They control the streets completely. They control your rations. And if they so want, which they weren't doing yet, if they didn't like the way you looked today, they could have shot you and got away with it. It didn't matter that you were just an innocent person. Came home after this harassment now, and now I knew I can't play anymore. So instead of playing, I got used to running, because they would harass us and throw stones and stuff like that. I asked my father a simple question. What did I do? And he says, nothing. You were born Jewish.
November 8th and 9th of 1938 is arguably the most crucial time for the Jewish people up to this point in Vienna, Austria. Herschel Greenspan was a Polish Jewish refugee born in Germany. His assassination of the Nazi German diplomat Ernst von Rath on November 7th, 1938 in Paris resulted in Kristallnacht. In retaliation, as endorsed by Adolf Hitler and Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, the Nazis carried out state-sponsored raids of Jewish communities in Germany and in Austria. So this took place on November 8th and 9th at night, and Kurt is looking out his apartment window in horror as he sees all these Nazis taking the scrolls and the Torahs and the Jewish books and taking them out into the middle of the street and burning them and shattering the glass and destroying all the businesses, raiding people's apartments and homes. And some 90 people were killed in this one day, and about 30,000 were taken away to either labor camps or what would become concentration camps. All of the synagogues, 267 synagogues across Germany and Austria, were destroyed. Kurt's synagogue was the only one in Vienna that survived. And the third time that they tried to raid the Hermans, two Nazis stormed in, and they had to hide Kurt's dad in the upper shelf of their closet, and luckily Kurt's father wasn't found. He said it was the scariest moment of his life. So they're looking everywhere for possible ways of getting to America, and they see an ad posted in a newspaper. A Philadelphia couple, Gilbert and Eleanor Krauss, wealthy couple, sponsored by the Jewish fraternal organization Bri Shalom, are looking to bring in children from Vienna, Austria, to America. His mother submitted an application immediately for him when he was 9. A nurse and a pediatrician interviewed and tested Kurt for his health, intelligence, and his ability to be separated from his parents. He was one of 600 children interviewed, and on May 10th, 1939, the happiest day of his life, he was selected. This is how you can understand the difference between life and death. There was a child who was 7 years old, and he was scheduled to go on the trip, and he got sick, and they couldn't take a sick child with them overseas to America, otherwise they would bar the whole passage from coming through. So he was dropped, and they picked the next person on the list after him. And that child who was sick and missed his chance died 3 years later in the Buchenwald concentration camp. That was the difference between life and death. At the same time, while Kurt's mother is trying to help him gain passage to America, his father is going through a completely different route to find a way to America. His father and maternal grandparents fled to Cuba, but were denied entry and were sent back to France. A quota system created by the United States made it so only a certain amount of people from each country could enter the U.S. It meant that depending on where you were born, that would decide the availability of your passage to America. Since his mother was born in Germany and his father was born in Poland, both parents could not enter into the U.S. under the same quota. As his father was brought back to a displaced persons camp in France, his grandparents were eventually sent to Auschwitz. Kurt received a letter stating that he would be boarding the USS President Harding to Philadelphia. His mother took him to the train, but they weren't allowed to wave goodbye to their parents. Imagine, not even being able to wave goodbye to your parents. The families were told, if you cry, you are shot. Kurt was safely brought to the United States. Amazingly, all of Kurt's relatives, besides his grandparents, made their way to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Sadly, his grandparents were murdered in Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland. Auschwitz was the most infamous concentration camp, killing over 1 million people. It's a tragedy that his grandparents died there. And the amazing thing to think about is that he was so close to joining them, just like that child who missed his chance to come to America on the 50 Children passage. But people like the Krauses decided, I'm going to intervene. I'm going to stand up for what I believe in, and I'm going to rescue these children. Granted, it cost $1,000 per child to bring them to America, which averages out to around $800,000 in today's money. Not everyone has the means to do such a courageous act, but it is the principle that they decided to stand up and act courageously in what they believed in. Kurt was then able to go on to Muhlenberg College and Penn State, serving in the Korean War and leading a very successful and philanthropic life. So why is his story important? Why am I still telling it? He passed away 3 years ago now. It matters because Kurt, when he talked to me about what he experienced and the people he met and the adversity he faced, he wasn't speaking in a hateful manner. He felt sorry for the soldiers who were ordered to commit these awful crimes, whether they were doing so out of delight or whether they were doing so because they were forced to against their will. Because these people were brainwashed. And we paint them, he told me, we paint them as Nazis, like there's some demon. And they committed demonic acts. But they were really people, just like you or me. And it made me wonder, had I been a little German boy, Aryan, in Europe, would I have done the same? Would I have thrown stones at Kurt? Or would I have stood up? Would I have helped harbor Jews, risk my life, risk my family's life? I don't know. I'd like to think I would, but we don't know. And that's why when we think about the enemies, we can't think about them as individuals because they are corrupted and distorted by an institution. And it's the institution that we must wage war against because all individuals, I believe, can be saved. What have we learned? In fact, genocide didn't begin with the Holocaust. The first real genocide of the 20th century was the Armenian Genocide, which was centrally planned and administered by the Turkish government against the entire Armenian population of the Ottoman Empire. It was carried out during World War I between the years 1915 and 1918, as well as between 1920 and 1923. And these people were subjected to deportation, abduction, torture, massacre, and starvation. The great bulk of the Armenian population was forcibly removed from Armenia and Anatolia to Syria, where the vast majority was sent into the desert to die of thirst and hunger. And similar to the Jews in the Holocaust, the entire wealth of the Armenian people was expropriated by the government. Until I started researching, I don't even think I knew what the Armenian Genocide was. And I wondered why, but I realized our country doesn't even recognize the Armenian Genocide. A president has never officially labeled this atrocity against humanity as a genocide because the U.S. has to keep its relations with Turkey intact as they are an ally in NATO. And while you could argue, oh, it's just a change of words to protect our interests, I think it's imperative that this country, that our presidents, that our leaders label it a genocide rather than just an atrocity or a crime against humanity, because it must be understood that this wasn't a random act of killing. This was premeditated. These were organized by a government to root out an entire people. If the United States failed to label the Holocaust as a genocide because we didn't want to offend the German government, there would be infinite international outcry. And I believe in this situation, the U.S. government has a duty to the Armenian people to acknowledge this as a genocide. The Rwanda genocide of 1994 was a planned campaign of mass murder occurring over the course of some 100 days from April to July. The genocide was conceived by extremist elements of Rwanda's majority Hutu population who planned to kill the minority Tutsi population. And anyone who opposed those genocidal intentions would be wiped out as well. It is estimated that some 200,000 Hutu, spurred on by propaganda from various media outlets, participated in the genocide, killing more than 800,000 civilians. The war in Darfur is a major armed conflict in the Darfur region of Sudan, which began in February of 2003 when the Sudan Liberation Movement rebel groups began fighting the government of Sudan, which they accused of oppressing Darfur's non-Arab population. This began in 2003, and in 2016, the Sudanese government authorized the use of chemical weapons against non-Arab civilian populations. This is a problem that will continue until external forces intervene. And it remains to be seen if we will call Aleppo a genocide. Kurt's message wasn't about how evil the Nazis were. It was about how good the Krauses were, how good Brie Shalom was, how good his family was to him, how good the Philadelphia community was to him, embracing him, the error of the ways of Europe as they were manipulated by an institution. I believe it's our job to combat these institutions. Be aware that if you don't educate yourself on a topic, you really aren't ready to participate in the dialogue, in the conversation. Your voice doesn't matter yet. And you may be scared of what you don't know. I was very ignorant and scared of what I didn't know. I participated in a civic education project in the summer after my sophomore year at Johns Hopkins University, and we took a field trip to Washington, D.C. We were outside of the White House, and as usual, there's different people advocating for different causes and peacefully protesting or sharing their message. And I saw 4 African men holding up signs and chanting through a microphone, and I didn't really understand what the signs said, and initially I was scared. It was only after the fact that I realized that they were calling on Washington, D.C. to intervene in the genocide occurring in Sudan. The very topic that I'm so invested in, I didn't realize that that was just like any other genocide, like the Holocaust or the Armenian genocide or any persecution of anyone. Those people were just like Kurt, but because I didn't see them as a person like myself, as a white Jewish male, I was scared. I think what I've learned from Kurt's story is there are many perspectives in the world, and before you buy into any perspective, you should educate yourself from a non-biased point of view, from fact. Interpret the information yourself, and then join the conversation. Because any group, any people is susceptible to being manipulated by an institution, an organization, or at the highest front, a government, which allows genocide and persecution and violence and tyranny to flourish in this world. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you would like to read more, please use the resources provided by the Holocaust Awareness Museum, the National Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and any other resources attached at the end credits of this video and in the description below. Thank you so much once again.